Top 10 reasons to use the buyer broker. Exclusive employment agreement (BBA). When a seller signs a listing agreement, the seller understands how much they are going to pay for the broker's service. In contrast, most buyers do not understand the new way Arizona is having to negotiate the buyer's agent's compensation or the concept of procuring cause. The Arizona Realtors are buyer broker. Exclusive employment agreement, buyer broker agreement, can be used to address this issue and has many other benefits. Top 10 benefits of using the Arizona Realtors are buyer broker agreement. 1. Sets forth how the buyer's broker is to be compensated for their services. 2. Assures that the broker will be compensated the agreed upon amount if the buyer purchases a property during the term of the buyer broker agreement. 3. With the understanding of how compensation works, the buyer agrees to work exclusively with the broker and be accompanied by the broker on the buyer's first visit to any property. The buyer acknowledges that the broker may not be compensated by the builder, seller, or seller's agent if the broker does not accompany the buyer on the first visit to a model home, new home, lot, or open house, which would eliminate any credit against the compensation owed by the buyer to the buyer's broker, or that the seller of any property may not be offering a co-broke. This will all fall then on the buyer to pay for the buyer's agent's commission. 4. Provides an opportunity to tout the services the buyer will receive. A buyer broker's services are so much more than just showing the buyer listings. The buyer broker will assist and advise the buyer throughout the entire home buying process within the scope of the broker's expertise and licensing. 5. Builds trust with the buyer through education and transparent upfront conversations. 6. Obtains the buyer's agreement to act in good faith, provide the information necessary to acquire the property, and conduct any inspections, investigations that the buyer deems material and/or important. 7. Protects both the broker and the buyer by avoiding misunderstandings. Managing expectations is an important risk management practice. 8. Assures the buyer's broker that the buyer is serious about buying a home, and assures the buyer that the buyer's broker is serious about finding them a home and guiding them to close of escrow. 9. Satisfies the legal requirement that a buyer's broker must have a written employment agreement with a buyer to be paid a commission by the buyer. Real estate brokers may sue to recover compensation due under a real estate employment agreement only if there is a written agreement that complies with both the Statute of Frauds, ARS, Power 44-101-7, which requires a written signature of the party to be charged, and the Real Estate Employment Agreement Statute, ARS, Power 32-2151, SO2-A, which requires that all real estate employment agreements be signed by all parties to the agreement and O be written in clear and unambiguous language, O fully set forth all material terms, including the terms of broker compensation, O have a definite duration or expiration date, showing dates of inception and expiration. 10. Is an enforceable contract that can be helpful in the event of a commission dispute or in a dispute with a buyer. Some buyers may be reluctant at first when asked to sign a buyer-broker agreement. View this reluctance as an opportunity to educate the buyer about the value of your services and build trust. As you review the buyer-broker agreement, explain your duties and obligations to the buyer and reinforce that you are a professional who follows the NAR Code of Ethics and that the buyer-broker agreement ensures the buyer has a dedicated and knowledgeable advocate representing them in the transaction. This is also a great time to educate the buyer that they may be responsible and obligated to pay the buyer's agent commission, with credits, if any, from the seller. The commission is not from the listing agent's agreed-upon commission anymore. The commission to the buyer's agent is directly from the seller now. For additional information on buyer-broker agreements, if you go into one of these links, hit the back button to return to the lesson. NAR Window to the Law. Benefits of using a buyer representation agreement. How buyer agreements boost your value. Fend off claims. NAR.Realtor. Avoid a bad practice that can deprive you of a commission. Hey, That was my buyer and my commission. Real estate tales from the courtroom. The buyer's broker's signature. 1. Michelle Lind, Esquire, is an attorney who currently serves of counsel to the Arizona Realtors. She is also the author of the book, Arizona Real Estate, A Professional's Guide to Law and Practice, 3rd ed. Watch for the 4th edition, which should be available soon. For more real estate-related articles, visit Michelle's blog at Arizona Real Estate, A Professional's Guide to Law and Practice, Arizona Real Estate Professional Guide, blogspot.com. This article is of a general nature and may not be updated or revised for accuracy as statutory or case law changes following the date of first publication. Further, this article reflects only the opinion of the author, is not intended as definitive legal advice, and you should not act upon it without seeking independent legal counsel. 8/11/23. By Nikki Salgot, Esquire, Arizona Realtors R, Associate Counsel. Recently, my neighbor texted me and asked, "If there is a house you are interested in, would you get an agent or go right to the listing agent and see if he'll credit you some of his commission?" Did you just gasp? So did I. I told her it depends on her wants and needs, and advised her she should interview agents. Then guess what happened? She texted, "I want to contact the listing agent first to see the place, and then interview him with the others." Insert hand to forehead. This is where I picked up the phone and called her to explain that she needs to interview agents and pick one before she looks at properties, because she could cause an issue with who gets paid. Of course, my neighbor has no understanding of how her actions could create problems and confusion. Most of the public doesn't, so how do you protect yourself? The National Association of Realtors R, Code of Ethics, Standard of Practice. 1613 states, before providing substantive services, such as writing a purchase offer or presenting a CMA, to prospects, Realtors R shall ask prospects whether they are a party to any exclusive representation agreement. Realtors R shall not knowingly provide substantive services concerning a prospective transaction to prospects who are parties to exclusive representation agreements, except with the consent of the prospect's exclusive representatives or at the direction of prospects. Adopted 193, amended 104. What does this mean? It means you first need to find out if the prospect has an exclusive representation agreement with another agent before undertaking any substantive work on the prospect's behalf. The problem is, a lot of agents end the conversation there and do not ask any follow-up questions or have any further discussion with the prospect about representation, which may lead to bigger issues down the road. Always go 6 deep with your questions. Buyer want a large yard. To some, that may be a nice 10x10 grassy area. To others, it may be acreage for their 15 horses. Consider this. You are sitting at an open house and you ask the prospect if they have an agent, and the prospect lies and says no because they fear that you won't answer questions about the property. What if the prospect says yes, even though they aren't represented because they don't want a salesperson trying to sell them services? Regardless of the answer, why not ask more questions? How long has the prospect been looking at homes? Has the prospect viewed homes with other agents? What if someone tells you they found their dream home and asks you to write a contract? Do you ask more questions? Or are you so excited to land a client that you go ahead and write the offer? Wouldn't it be wise to ask questions like, have you already seen the home? If so, when? Did you talk to another agent? Even if you have an exclusive representation agreement with the client, these questions are important, because what if your client is talking about a home you haven't shown them? Did the client walk into the home, or did they see it on a website? The public is not familiar with the concept of procuring cause and usually doesn't care who earns the commission. In the above scenarios, one of the answers could change whether you are the procuring cause and are subsequently going to be paid. What happens if there is a potential issue with procuring cause? Fortunately, commission issues are frequently settled between the brokers with a referral fee or through mediation. This usually occurs after close of escrow. What you don't want to happen is to have your fate determined through arbitration. Why? Because in arbitration, there is a winner and a loser. In other words, money is awarded to only one party. Be proactive. Ask more questions, talk to your broker, and reach out to the other agent. Having these conversations up front and asking follow-up questions will benefit you in the long run. You must reach out to the listing agent to see if the seller is offering any commission to the buyer's agent anyway. That would bring up a conversation with the buyer that the seller is not offering any buyer's agent commission on that property, so the buyer would be responsible to pay the buyer's agent. Ultimately, proactive conversations with prospects regarding representation will help stave off commission disputes. Note too that when you are working with a possible tenant, agency disclosure is also required. Issue: the real estate agent generally represents tenants looking for rental residential property. The real estate agent discusses agency issues with tenants at the beginning of the representation and confirms his representation in writing when the rental agreement is executed. Should the real estate agent also have the tenant review and sign the AAR Real Estate Agency Disclosure and Election Form? Answer: yes. The AAR Real Estate Agency Disclosure and Election Form is designed for use by sellers and buyers, as well as for landlords and tenants. See Line 3. The Arizona Realtors, ER. Buyer-broker agreement ensures that the buyer's broker will be compensated regardless of whether the buyer purchases a property during the agreement's term.